British nature is in crisis. Some of the statistics that I've read are truly shocking. Between the war and the 1990s, we lost 75,000 miles of hedgerows. We've lost 97% of our wildflower meadows. Bird and insect species are in decline rapidly. However, there are the seeds of hope. Today, I'm at the Heal Somerset site. This is the first site of the Heal Rewilding project, which is an ambitious vision to rewild a site in every single county in England. And at Sherlock Pages, our little bookshop in Frome, Somerset, we were recently reading Wilding by Isabella Tree. Now, that book has been an inspiration for rewilders, wilders, whatever you want to call it, across the country and further afield. And I'm just about to talk to the chief executive, the acting chief executive of Heal Rewilding, here at the Heal Somerset site, Jan Stannard. So let's go and have a chat about rewilding and making places for nature to thrive. So we're in the farmhouse here at Heal Somerset, and I'm joined by Jan Stannard, the co-founder and acting chief executive of Heal Rewilding. Jan, thank you so much for joining us.
So pleased to be here.
It's so inspiring to be here on the site today. We were walking around and just marveling at the ambition of what you're trying to achieve, not only on this site, but I hoped you could tell us a little bit about the original vision for Heal Rewilding across the whole country.
We launched in March 2020 with the simple idea of raising money to buy land and rewild it in every county in England. So our vision is to create a site of around 500 acres, 200 hectares, in every county to be a stronghold for nature. So nature, climate and well-being were the three bases on which we founded the charity, and now we are sitting with our first site.
And can you tell us a little bit about Heal Somerset, how you settled on this as your first site? And for anyone who's watching this and is familiar with our bookshop, Sherlock Pages in Frome, we're just 15 minutes drive away. And you were saying that people are welcome to come and visit the site. So if you could tell us a little bit about the size, when you acquired the site, and what you're planning to do with it.
A site of the sort of size we want in every county will be around the 4 to 6 million pounds mark. And you cannot, unless you're bankrolled by very wealthy people, you can't as a charity bring that amount of money together that as quickly as is needed for the nature and climate emergencies. So we decided to find affordable lending to do it, which we did relatively quickly. But what took a long time was finding somewhere to use it. So from that March until for about 2.5 years, we looked in 8 counties, from Kent across to Somerset. And we only saw in that time about 4 suitable places. So we heard about this site and we couldn't have landed in ended up in a more extraordinary place, because Frome and Bruton as towns are very interested in this sort of work. There are a lot of people around here who have sites or land that they are running in a way that's friendly to nature. And so here we are. It's 460 acres, very hard to envisage, but you can stand in the middle of it. We are pretty much in the middle in this farmhouse, and you can look in as far as the eye can see. It's beautiful, undulating Somerset countryside, big fields, beautiful hedgerows, quite old hedgerows in many cases. And we have 3 rivers on the site, which is really wonderful. And we arrived in January last year. The site was an intensive dairy farm until 2015. And then after that, there was some farming, but we don't have the records for that. But from the day of our arrival, all of the activities related to farming stopped, and the wildlife here began to recover from that first day.
And what's the plan over the next 5, 10, 15 years? Because as you said, you were raring to go, and it's a really visionary model to finance Heal. And I admire that ambition just to get going, because as you were saying before we got on camera, this is a crisis and we need to act now. So what's your plan in the stages of the rewilding process? And that actually might allow us to talk a little bit about what is rewilding. Isabella Tree's book is called Wilding. Sometimes there's a little bit of controversy around the language. So it'd be really interesting to hear about your plans for the site, and within that, what is your concept of rewilding?
We have this goal of 48 sites, one in every county. We've alighted upon Somerset, and we have a vision for how each site will work, but this is our blueprint site. So we are spending the time needed to find out every aspect you can think of running a nature-led site, a nature recovery site, from what uses of buildings might we make, how quickly or slowly might the land change from the start, which is pasture. So we are really making sure that we understand what we're working with before then moving on to site 2. One example of an area which is gradually becoming clearer is natural capital. So natural capital means various ways of the private sector funding this kind of work to help nature and climate recovery. But all of that has been delayed. But it could mean that our sites from here onwards, from number 2 onwards, are natural capital funded significantly. But we won't know that until we've finalised the natural capital here. When I say finalised, really it's begun the natural capital work here.
We're in a crisis, so it's all hands on deck, and obviously there is the need for government policy changes to drive improvements in nature, to let nature thrive, to attempt to recover what we've lost. Private sector is going to have to contribute as well. How can people get involved in Heal Rewilding if they would like to, as individuals or as organisations they might be linked to?
So I'll pick up first your point about government changes. The introduction of the new way in which people who own land are paid to manage it is called the Environmental Land Management Scheme. People used to be paid for the amount of land they own, and it's a much fairer system now, but it's taking a long time to come in. But that won't save nature, and that won't fix the climate, that won't get us to net zero. So we need both the business sector and individuals to help. So that's what's going to make all the difference. Very simple way to help our work. Every Heal site will have a Heal 3x3 scheme. So we have one here at Somerset. So 3x3 means 3 metres by 3 metres, and it's linked to this amazing global system called What 3 Words.
Yeah, I know it well.
So for people that don't know it, these clever Brits came up with a way of giving a 3-word address, floor.cupboard.chair, to every 3 metre by 3 metre square in the world, and we have them all over our site. And for £20, you can make a 1-year donation, which helps us pay off that lending for that square. And then for £3 a year thereafter, you can keep your name associated with that square. So either you can look remotely and see where your square is on the What 3 Words app, or you can come here, as people have. I remember Christine with her phone walking up one of the tracks and saying, I know my square's near here. And she walked to her square and found hedge and a baby oak tree on it.
Oh, that's
so she
pretty
was
special square.
Absolutely thrilled. Pretty special square. So we would love anyone watching this to make that donation.
Well, me and Jan were talking before filming today, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it. I do want to be ambitious, but I want Sherlock and Pages and our customers to be able to follow this story through acquiring some of our own squares temporarily and helping you to help them flourish. So for viewers, watch this space. We will have some sort of plan for that, and we had various ideas, but I won't go into it now. I just wanted to touch on the book Wilding by Isabella Tree, which I'll get up. Anyone who's not read this book and you're interested in Sherlock and Pages, and you're watching this video because you've seen that it's discussing rewilding, I think you have to read it. It is. I describe it to customers in the shop as, and they're a little bit surprised at first with my enthusiasm, I say it is infuriating, frustrating, but ultimately really hopeful and roll your sleeves up inspiring. And that's exactly what you've done. Can you tell us a little bit about reading Wilding and where that came on your own journey? Because it seemed to be that you were already slightly on this journey already, but then it really added some fuel to your fire, I guess.
Absolutely. In my opinion, the publication of Wilding has been the transformative incident in the history of this alternative way of managing land. And before we speak about the book and how it fed into, how it fueled really what has happened in terms of the creation of Heal, let's talk about what rewilding is or wilding. Many people will be familiar with conservation, and that has been the way in which we have preserved, conserved the fragments left. So we have these fragments, so they're owned and they're managed generally through a human lens. And the idea is that if there's a special species, you manage for that species. By contrast, what rewilding does is have a whole ecosystem, nature-led approach, with humans only intervening to help with the gaps that are there, which are preventing the ecosystem from working as it should. That's fairly technical and complex, but just to say that nature has been evolving for millennia. We are a very clever species and we think we know how to fix things for nature, but actually nature knows better than we do, but it does need a helping hand. So rewilding is nature-led recovery, and most importantly, it's about new spaces, about seeing wildlife of any sort resurge rather than having targets and outcomes. So rewilding has no targets and outcomes. We will not say, let's plant 100-acre wood, because nature's very good at planting its own baby trees. So that's essentially the difference between the two approaches. And I want to say that without the work of the conservation movement, we wouldn't have the nature that we have left. But no matter how much work they did, the declines have just continued. Yeah. And my current bugbear is that there's something called the State of Nature report.
Yeah.
It comes out every few years. It's the most depressing read for anyone that loves nature.
Is this WWF?
It's I'm not sure who the authors are actually. It's a collective piece of work, but it is literally, there was one in 2016, for example, and I think one in 2020, but they are really challenging. And I'm arguing for a State of Nature report that's just in rewilding sites, because the story would be utterly the other way around.
Yeah.
You'd be seeing a state of recovery, not a state of decline.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and that's really key. So let's talk about the impact of wilding. So Isabella Tree and Charlie Burrell, I know, and I know that they do talk about rewilding, but they took a decision to call it wilding, and it honestly doesn't matter. We don't care what term people use. It's all about giving nature a hand to recover. And reading that book, it's brilliant because it's not only a wonderful story of a family and how they got themselves out of a massive financial hole, but it's the story of discovery and articulating the work of others. So they would say that they looked at the work done by this amazing guy called Frans Vera from the Netherlands, who essentially said there was no way that our countries, Britain or Europe, were closed canopy forests, because we had huge herds of wild cattle, wild horses, wild pigs, wild boar, and lots of other things. And before the last ice age, elephants and rhinoceroses, and they kept the landscape open as well as forested.
So there seems to be this popular idea in the public imagination that before the medieval period, the forests just spread across the land, and that's what closed canopy means. But in the book, it's described how much richer and diverse nature is when left in its own state.
Yes. So Heal Somerset is at the heart of the Forest of Selwood. Forest of Selwood was a 14th century hunting forest. This number might be wrong, but I think it's 40,000 acres or more. Huge forest, but it was the old definition of the word forest, which is effectively a mosaic of habitats. It's marshland, boggy bits, scrubby bits, open areas of grass, and woodland. So that is how nature works. Yeah. So I was completely convinced by this. Not everybody is, but I was utterly convinced with the idea that a mosaic of habitats was the way that nature naturally works. And remember that rewilding is not about going backwards. So we are not recreating a past. What past would we choose? Would we choose post-glacial? Would we choose 14th century? Would we choose Victorian? You're not going back. What you're doing is enabling nature to return itself to a richer state.
So when it comes to rewilding, Jan, from what you're saying, it almost sounds like there is no or very little intervention. But are there going to have to be actions that you take to help initiate those natural processes? And sometimes I think rewilding ideas are seen as particularly controversial because of, large mammal reintroductions and things like this. So is there any of that that's going to be on the table further down the line on this site and other sites?
Rewilding operates along a spectrum. Some people buy land, close the gate and walk away, and they literally abandon. And eventually that land will become closed canopy forest, unless there are deer or other things present to keep it more open. Our approach follows the Rewilding Britain approach, actually, who are the sort of industry body for us rewilders. It is come and assess the land. How is it? Where does it begin? And what kind of land is it? And what's here already and what's necessary? So a great example is trees. So most rewilding, but not all, is not about planting trees, because trees are very good at reproducing themselves. However, if we'd bought a site where all of the trees have been taken out and there are areas without trees, you have to plant trees, otherwise you never get trees. So you might if they drifted in, but you generally wouldn't get trees. So on this site, for example, the Forest of Selwood means sallow wood, and sallow means willow. So we are sitting at the heart of what was the Forest of the Sallow Wood. Now, if you walk out there, you will hardly see any willow because it's all been taken out. So one of the decisions that we've taken is to plant willow, not only because it would have been here and it's been, nature may take some time to recover willow, and there is a climate emergency and tree planting helps, but also we have beavers on the site, wild living beavers on the site, and that's their favourite food. One of the missing pieces in a landscape is large animals. This landscape in Somerset would have had straight-tusked elephants and rhinoceroses, wild horses, wild cattle, lots of wild boar, loads of beavers, and deer, roe, the previous form of fallow, because fallow was originally native and sometimes is seen as not native, red deer particularly. And all of those species would have been roaming through the landscape, disturbing it. And if you've read Wilding, you'll remember that is really key. So we only have deer and now beaver, but we need to look at getting some more dynamism into the way the landscape is impacted, and having domesticated versions of those now extinct wild creatures is what we will do. So we are getting pigs in soon. And then we will bring in cattle, which could be about a year later, and then ponies. And a couple of key things to say: very, very small numbers, 2 or 3 pigs at the most. Every pig needs 60 acres if they're kept wild. A small number of cattle, starting with, say, 5, perhaps going up to 10 or 12, but small herd, and then a small herd of ponies eventually. That will take several years to do. And they are not farmed produce. So these are purely being kept as ecosystem engineers. So they'll live out their lives on the site.
So, Jan, you've had the site for 21 months now. What changes have you seen? I'm really keen that we get outside and show people the conditions that we're viewing now and what might happen in the future. But what changes have you seen? And can people come down? Are they welcome to come down and view this for themselves?
Starting with the changes, we have done nothing on the site yet apart from mow paths. And there is one footpath that crosses the site. We're a dog-free site because we're looking after the wildlife, but people can bring their dogs on the lead on the footpath. We ask them to keep them on the lead. But we have mown 5 to 6 miles of permissive paths, so people can come anytime, day or night. Apart from 10 days over Christmas, we're open. So you can literally come. It's free to access. We have 30 parking spaces, so people do need to pre-book their parking. We ask for £3 donation for that. But that's all. And then people can make an optional donation when they come, but essentially it's free. So that's part of our charitable mission, is to have people come when they like. So the mown paths are a change, and the animals love the mown paths. They use those rather than ploughing through the undergrowth. But the changes have been astonishing. In 21 months, the grass has grown long, it's flopped over. We've had an explosion of small mammals. That's brought birds of prey in. We had short-eared owls here for the first time. One of them stayed for several months. We've got barn owls breeding, tawny owls breeding, kestrels breeding. The kestrels are the nearest thing to a zoo. You can come and pretty much see a kestrel every time you come. We've got flocks of 200 plus goldfinches, 100 meadow pipits. We're a stronghold with our neighbours for tree pipits. We've got 54 bird species. We've got breeding grass snakes. It's astonishing. But most of the wildlife is here in very small numbers. So we've got lots of different kinds of wildlife, but not much of each thing. But we're at sort of Adam and Eve stage. We've got small numbers of populations that will gradually grow. 9 glowworms are found this year, which is super exciting. We know we've got 7 bat species. We could have up to 12 to 14 bat species. So it's incredibly quick.
Hearing you talk about the nature that has returned to this site just fills me with joy, and I can almost feel a tingling inside, and it's hard to put a value on that. I used to work on the Chatsworth estate in Derbyshire, and I remember walking into a barn there and seeing my first and only ever barn owl that I've seen, and there was maybe 2 or 3 seconds probably where we looked at each other across the barn before it flew off. And that will stay with me for the rest of my life, and is something that I talk about in the pubs of England even now. So it's impossible to put a value on that. And I think we don't realise what we've lost, the bird song that we no longer hear, the lack of buzzing in creatures in our gardens, fields, hedgerows, pathways. So hearing about this is just making me smile, and I'm desperate to get out and see what you're doing. So maybe I suggest that we carry on the conversation and get out and see the site here.
Great. Good.
Okay, so we're out in the field on site, and we're only a minute or 2 away from the farmhouse, but we stopped here because Jan said, well, if you want to do a before and after shot, this is the perfect place. So Jan, before and after.
So by before, what I mean is that the grasses, which are agricultural grasses in the field, were cut several times a year for silage. So a machine comes along and takes the grass, and it means that the fields are sort of short. The grass is short like this. And then when we arrived in January last year, we stopped taking the grass, and apart from the mown fields. So the long grass that you can see behind us, and these brown plants are called docks. So you can see lots of different grass species and docks. That is what nature does when you leave it alone.
And that's only 21 months, right?
That's 21 months. And it did look like this sort of last year, that it's grown a lot in height more.
And there's already a lot of change in the landscape. Me and Sam were wandering around before because we didn't know where we were going. But and we were saying how atmospheric it was in the morning fog. What's it been like integrating into the farming community here, the wider community? Because this is quite a change to land use.
The biggest change, I think, for anyone that's seen this land in the past is how different it looks. Mm-hmm. And for most people, they think that's not how the countryside looks.
Right.
What they don't understand is this is nature's idea of an absolutely dream place. This is a dream for nature.
Yeah.
But if you are someone who is a farmer and is using land to produce food, you don't want docks, and you don't want thistles, and you don't want brambles, you don't want nettles. Well, those are all brilliant for insects. So getting used to the way that something looks is a change, and it's the sense of change which is either incredibly exciting or incredibly challenging, depending on what sort of person you are.
So already in the farmhouse, we talked about how people can get involved. There's potential for companies to get involved. Can you tell us a little bit about what the acronym BNG is and what this might possibly mean for people like yourselves in the countryside?
Biodiversity net gain is one type of natural capital, which is money coming into fund recovery of nature, climate action, and so on. It became law in February for big housing developers and in April for small ones. And it means that if you are somebody who is building on any land that's green or brown, that you have to increase the habitat on that land. And by habitat, we mean the areas of grass, the hedges, if there are any woods. You have to increase that by 10% or more in some places. And if you cannot do that on the site where you're doing your building, you have to find an area off-site, a place like us, who can do that for you.
Right.
That's the essence
of it. And they would pay you, essentially.
And they pay us. We have a contract with the council, with Somerset Council in this case, and then we are paid to produce biodiversity net gain units, which are complicated, but basically it means that we do our work of making habitats to make more habitats in better condition. So, for example, this grass that you can see behind us is an improved grassland. It's natural grass, but it's been fertilised and managed in a way that's made it suitable for farming. Mm-hmm. We are now managing that grass in a different way, where it will become more species rich over many years.
Yeah, and have you conducted some assessments, some initial baseline assessments of what's here? Is that process still continuing? And how regularly will you be monitoring different species across the site? So
baselining comes in a couple of forms. You've got things like habitat and carbon baselining, and then you've got species baselining. Mm-hmm. So 2023 was our habitat and carbon year, mm-hmm. and this year is our species year. So last year we had a professional ecological company come and survey every single field and assess its starting condition. Mm-hmm. So that's our baseline for BNG and for any biodiversity income we may get in the future. So we know what it was like. And then we surveyed carbon, so we know what our carbon, existing carbon stocks are on the site. And then this year we're doing species surveys. We are surveying for 3 indicator species. Mm-hmm. So the results of those surveys will indicate the health of the ecosystem. And they are birds, bats and invertebrates. We've also had our hydrology done, so how does the water flow across the land? Because one of the big interventions in the next couple of years is going to be restoring the natural flow of water across. So it rains, how does it flow off the land? At the moment it goes into drains, under the ground, into the rivers, and we're going to change that. We'll hold the water back on the land. So those are the two things. And in terms of frequency, the species surveys this year have cost us, we've had to raise the money for it, £39,000.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
So frequency is a blend of money or funding and necessity, because some species might change relatively quickly, and we do have volunteers doing it too, but what you need are robust replicable surveys, and that's where we're focused. But we're doing lots of other things too, but those are the three core surveys.
So we really need to get behind this as individuals, as companies, as people, and I'm feeling viscerally inspired speaking to you. Something magical is happening here, and this is just the first step on hopefully a long and wild journey. But you were mentioning a place that people can visit on the site and experience something very, very special. So where are we going to head to next, Jan?
We're going to head to our campsite, where we have a performance space when people aren't camping. And it is something really special. All
right, let's take a look. So we've just walked up the trackway and we've made it to the special location that Jan was talking about. So what can people experience right here on this spot, but also across the site more generally?
So we're standing in the middle of the performance space of Out of the Darkness. And it is a unique way of experiencing the countryside. A group of up to 25 people comes in the dark up to this space and sits on benches around a beautiful campfire, surrounded by a ring of lights, looking up at the stars and the moon if it's a clear night. And for 25 minutes or so, we listen to a soundscape of the sounds of nature, the nature that's still here, that was here recently, and that was here in the ancient past. And it is completely mesmerizing. It's a beautiful composition, and what we don't do is tell people what these sounds are, and most people can only identify a few, and it makes the point that the ancestors of the people that lived here would have known all of these sounds, and we've lost all that. So it sort of makes the point about how depleted we are from a sound point of view as well as visual.
And if people are interested in experiencing that for themselves, which I'm sure they will be, where can they find out more? Should they follow your channels?
If they go to follow our social channels at Heal Rewilding, or go to our Heal Somerset site, and performances start every week from the 20th of March.
And people can camp here and go on tours. Are there guided tours?
There are guided tours. There are wildlife tours. They can camp. So we have a campsite behind us. Again, that's bookable through our Heal Somerset website, healsomerset.org.uk, and they can come just by themselves anytime.
Well, I really suggest people do that. They maybe stop at Sherlock Pages on the way,
Definitely.
Or after, and buy lots of nature books, and then come and visit the first Heal Rewilding site, which we're very lucky to have here in Somerset. Jan, thank you so much for your time today. Genuinely feeling, as I said, that visceral sense of excitement and inspiration.
It's been brilliant to have you here and talk about this project, which we all love so much. So thank you so much.
And I really hope that we can do something long term to support this site and others as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.